Getting to the heart of the matter. Here's Guy Wayman, Ben Brunson, and Frank Vernuccio with more Inside the News.
Welcome back to Inside the News. Frank Vernuccio with USAGovPolicy.com. Ben Brunson. You can find his books at benbrunson.com and amazon.com. All right, let's dig into some things here more domestically. This is an interesting question. Frank, is Donald Trump signaling who his successor will be? Okay, look, you followed JD Vance going on along. He's the vice president, but he's been sent to do fraud up in Minnesota and all. But then you look at Marco Rubio, maybe getting some more face time. It's going to be one of those two, but is Trump enough of a genius to kind of work with both of these two and signal this is who my successor will be? Frank, you have the question.
Well, I think it's a lot more time until the next to the 2028 election, so I don't think he's signaling anybody yet at this point. But clearly what's happening in his administration is that he has the personal confidence, as well as the fact that he doesn't have to run for re-election, to allow people like JD Vance and Marco Rubio to shine. And both of them have, in fact, done a spectacular job, which opens up the broader point, which is that the Republicans have a pretty solid bullpen to run for the 2020 election. When you look at what the Democrats have, it's a pretty poor selection of potential candidates. Gavin Newsom has become a joke. AOC destroyed herself when she was over in Europe. JD Pritzker, well, that's just laughable. So you look at the Democrats, and no one who seems to be the obvious candidate within the Democratic Party really has the capability of holding that banner and doing a credible race. You can point to people like like Shapiro and so forth. And unfortunately, the anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party is going to prevent that candidate from running forward. Same thing with Rahm Emanuel, who many looked at as a dark horse candidate. He also is going to suffer from the anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party. So I think the Democrats have very tough sledding going forward.
Absolutely. You look at the anti-Semitism, even among some of the rhinos. Let's look at Tucker Carlson. Let's look at Megyn Kelly. Let's look at
Candace Owens.
Yeah, Candace Owens. And it is absolutely amazing that they are not where they were 5 years ago in on this track. But Ben, go.
Yeah, look, the AOC and Kamala share something in common. They commit suicide every time they open their mouths to opine on a serious topic. So you quickly realize there's, nothing but emptiness in those brains. When it comes to, we started this by talking about Rubio versus JD Vance. I agree with Frank. Trump is letting each one shine. He recognizes where they each have their relative advantage. JD Vance is very comfortable on the campaign trail. So I see JD Vance starting to hold town halls as a substitute for Donald Trump, who, despite working apparently 24/7, as far as I can tell, I don't know when Donald Trump sleeps, but despite working nonstop, there's still room for JD Vance to go run some of these town hall meetings that the administration likes to do. And JD Vance loves it. He's a natural at it. Rubio's not a campaigner. He's an administrator. He's very comfortable in a defined role where he has defined powers, like being Secretary of State, along with everything else he's doing under Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, I think, is the type of guy, hey, if you keep performing, I'm just going to keep handing you more and more. I'm going to add to your portfolio until you cry uncle. So apparently Rubio hasn't cried uncle just yet. But I think just Donald Trump's enjoying that he has two workhorses that have different styles and different relative advantages, and he's letting each run where they can add the most.
Frank, have we ever seen a cabinet this talented? I mean, we've talked about those two, but then you also have Scott Bessent, and then go on down the list. And now we've got Markwayne Mullen, who's now going to be DHS, and Brooke Rollins, absolutely fantastic. And I mean, you go on down that cabinet list, and then the gal in charge of education who wants to put herself out of a job. This is tremendous stuff.
Yeah, it is. It almost harkens back to Abraham Lincoln's cabinet of rivals. in terms of their qualifications, in terms of their dedication. And I think one of the interesting things about each one of them is that they are each pushing for the good of the country.
Yes.
And I think that's a real difference. I'm sure, JD Vance and I'm sure Marco Rubio, in the back of their mind is thinking about the White House and about what they could do in 2028. But they're doing the job of protecting the country and doing it well. What makes this look even better is the contrast between, we said, a cabinet of rivals or a cabinet of qualified people, and the cabinet of utter idiots that we had under Joe Biden. That some of these guys you wouldn't want working your gas station, let alone working as cabinet members to the president of the United States. And that contrast is shown even larger right now.
You look at what happened in the last 4 years under Biden here, Ben, and it is truly amazing that this country survived under the lunatic, idiot, moronic people these were Obama people that they put in, and they were basically trying to run the country. I don't know if Joe Biden was trying to run the country as well, because Joe just did not have the stuff upstairs to do it.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when we were talking about Obama's third term. I see the Biden administration as just a gaggle of useful idiots, kind of like the Code Pink idiots down in Havana the last week. Just complete useful idiots, morons that are a waste of space, other than they are easily used and manipulated by powerful people behind the scenes. In the case of the leftists who went to Havana, they're completely manipulated by the Cuban dictators who have nothing. They preside over a completely bankrupt and valueless society, but they just hold on to power for the sake of power. In the case of the Biden administration, you had a bunch of useful idiots, a bunch of incompetents, but it allowed a lot of people affiliated with Barack Obama, like Susan Rice, to exercise power behind the scenes and to have basic control over everything that was done under the Biden administration. So to your point, Guy, it was the third term of Barack Obama, and I think history will judge it as exactly that. And unfortunately, a third term in which there was no accountability whatsoever. So you were free to engage in the wildest excesses of your liberal fantasies. During his first two terms, Obama was somewhat held in check from that point of view, because he did care about his standing as he was viewed as the president, where his polling was. So he was held in check. He was held accountable. He was not held accountable during the Biden administration.
Absolutely. Do you want to add another point here before we have to take a break, Frank?
Just one side note. Recently in the headlines, AOC was found, the congresswoman from Queens in New York City, was found to have spent vast amounts of her campaign funds on a psychiatrist who dabbled in psychedelic therapy. If you need to have a better explanation of liberal policies, I don't think you can find it more extant, more relevant than the fact that one of the leading spokeswomen of the left has used her campaign cash to consult a psychiatrist who engages in psychedelic therapy. Tells you a lot about where the left is at.
Oh my goodness. All right, we got to take a break. The Brunson Files are next, and I have several topics. I'm not going to throw one out because Ben could throw a left curveball here and get us off the topic, but that's okay. Stick with us. Grab that cup of Joe. We'll be back.
Getting to the heart of the matter. Here's Guy Wayman, Ben Brunson, and Frank Vernuccio with more Inside the News.
All right, welcome back to our fourth segment of Inside the News. Welcome aboard. And this is Palm Sunday weekend. Next weekend will be Easter, and we might share a little bit of thoughts on that in our next segment to lead up. But right now, it's time for the Brunson Files. Ben, go.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve and Jay Powell. Of course, Donald Trump named Kevin Warsh to be the new chairman. Jay Powell's term as chairman, thankfully, comes to an end May 15th. Although he may remain as a board governor. Traditionally, when the Fed chairman's term ends, the chairman steps down from the board of governors. There are 7 members of the Federal Board of Governors. Jay Powell technically can stay on the Board of Governors until 2028. I think January of 2028. I think he's threatening to do so. He's using this as leverage to try to stop the investigation that's going on into his activities with regards to the ridiculous price tag of the remodeling and refurbishing of the Federal Reserve headquarters in DC, which according to Donald Trump is closing in on a $4 billion price tag. It's staggering. Donald Trump likes to say he could have done the entire job and had it done a long time ago for under $100 million, which is probably true. So it's amazing how much corruption are in these government contracts. It's really no different than looking at the railroad to nowhere out in California that is, I don't know, at 25 billion and counting. You know that when you go behind the scenes of these companies that sign these contracts that get funded perpetually to the tune of billions, you'll find lots of relatives who are on the payroll as senior advisors, making, $500,000 to $1 million a year inside these companies. That is how corrupt our whole system has become. And there's probably a lot of that in this Fed contract. Jay Powell's totally incompetent. He completely suffers from Trump derangement syndrome. I think he's dedicated to destroying Trump in the way he can. They did not cut rates in their last meeting. And what they're citing now, after they were proven completely wrong about tariffs causing inflation, tariffs do not cause inflation, something I said a year ago on this show. Now they're claiming that the oil price shock is going to cause inflation. Well, oil price shocks do not cause inflation, no more than tariffs cause inflation. They harm the economy, don't get me wrong. We're going to have, unfortunately, GDP growth not as strong as it otherwise would have been because of oil being at $100 a barrel, or maybe more, depending on where this goes. It will eventually come down to very low levels after this is all over, but it's a painful thing to go through. But that is not inflation. That is the relative change in the cost of oil. It is created because there are massive oil shortages in Asia. There are none in the US, but it is a global market. And unfortunately, the US spot price gets impacted by that global price because ultimately oil can be shipped out of this country to satisfy massive demand in China and other places in Asia, India, China, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, you name it. Everyone's thirsty for oil, and they get almost all their oil out of the Persian Gulf, which has been shut down. So it is a real situation. This country, thankfully, because of Trump's policies, especially during his first term, one of his greatest successes, we are still awash in oil in this country. We'd be awash in the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, except that Biden cut it by almost half just to try to manipulate midterm politics in his first term in office, which is another treasonous act by the prior administration. But Jerome Powell is, the sooner he's gone, the better. They may hold up Kevin Warsh's ultimate confirmation because of this ongoing investigation. It's arguable whether we should have an investigation, but Democrats are going to use all this as leverage to stop it. And, that just puts people above the law, and that is a very bad outcome.
Okay, Frank.
It's ironic that the same Democrats who said that soaring and almost permanent price increases that would have occurred under the Biden policy was no big deal, not a problem. And yet we now see those same voices who see a temporary increase in prices, which precedes probably a precipitous drop in energy prices, is somehow an existential crisis to America. There is no limit to the hypocrisy that we're seeing from the Democratic Party. As I said earlier, political parties have the right to express whatever opinions they want, but at some point, they're liable to the public to explain their point of view and to explain their logic. And when it comes to energy prices right now, there is no logic in what the Democrats are saying.
All right, that was Frank Vernuccio with the American Analysis and News and Media. You can find him at usagovpolicy.com. Ben Brunson, the author of The Falstaff Enigma and Esther Sling, his books. Find him at benbrunson.com or just go to amazon.com, click on the link, and boom, They are there, and Bob's your uncle. All right, we got to take a break here. We're going to be back and close out the show and have some final thoughts. This is Wayman Brunson and Venuccio. Stick with us. Welcome back to our last segment of Inside the News. Frank Venuccio, Ben Brunson. My name is Guy Wayman. The threat assessment. We mentioned Tulsi Gabbard briefly as far as the cabinet earlier in the program, but Frank, kind of expound upon that.
Yeah, the 2026 National Threat Assessment has been released, and Tulsi Gabbard, as Director of National Intelligence, testified before Congress on it. And she listed transnational organized crime, illicit drug trafficking, illegal migration, and the threat of Islamist ideology and terrorism, and of course, major power competition and WMD threats. When you outline particularly the WMD threats, it's important for everyone to realize at no point, even during the height of the Cold War, have we faced a greater WMD threat than we face now. During the height of the Cold War, it was basically just a bipolar situation, Russia and the United States. With the addition of China, which has never been restrained by any type of serious nuclear arms control policy, combined with what we're seeing out of North Korea and what could have happened with Iran if President Trump didn't take steps to stop it, presents the greatest WMD, weapons of mass destruction threat we have ever seen. And while many in Congress try to limit our defense budget in terms of WMDs, the reality of it is that we are facing a greater threat than ever before. It hasn't really reached the height of consciousness of the American people, but it is there. And again, when you look at China, not restrained by any type of arms control policy, nor North Korea, we're facing a real significant threat.
Ben Brunson.
Yeah, very, very serious issue. Look, Pakistan and India both have nuclear weapons. The sharp war they fought about a year ago that Donald Trump intervened to bring to an end threatened to turn into a nuclear exchange because there's that amount of enmity between the two countries. And it is a very dangerous scenario. Of course, Israel has a large nuclear stockpile. Stopping the Iranian nuclear program is so critical because, as we pointed out on this show for years and years from the beginning, the Saudis have made it clear, and they reiterated this lately, MBS reiterated it, that if Iran ever goes nuclear, the Saudis will begin a crash program to build their own nuclear weapons as a deterrent against the Iranians. So this war also stems to slow down and bring to a halt what would have been a massive nuclear arms race in the Middle East among a lot of pretty unstable and countries with a lot of religious fervor, to say the least. So this war is so critical. It has to come to the right conclusion. And the only way it can be the right conclusion is regime change.
That one missile, or those two missiles rather, going to Diego Garcia proved everything right there because they were secretly hidden underneath. They did not have to shoot those off. They could have kept on playing this game and they would have still been hidden underground. But that exposed everything to the whole world of, okay, Iran was not messing around. They really wanted world domination is what they really wanted. And then people would be under Sharia law, and that would not be acceptable either as well. Okay, Frank, your hot button topic.
Ever since the development of nuclear weapons and missiles, there's always been a mistaken belief that war can be fought from 30,000 feet, that it all can be done by the air. But you really don't win a war unless you have control of the ground. And one of the best weapons that we've ever developed for control of the ground is the A-10 Warthog airplane. Time after time after time, bureaucrats in the Air Force have said, let's get rid of this thing because now we have all sorts of high-flying jets and we can do it. So now we're in a war with Iran. And what is the star of the show? It's the A-10s, which are taking out the Iranian Navy. No matter how many times the bureaucrats at the Air Force and the Pentagon saying, forget the ground troops, forget the nitty-gritty of war, let's get rid of the A-10s. They've been proven wrong over and over again. And I guarantee after Iran is over, thanks to the A-10s in significant part, you're going to see the bureaucrats at the Pentagon once again say, let's get rid of the A-10s. And once again, it'll be a mistake.
You ever see a demo of those at an air show? You know why they're so important. Ben, go.
Yeah, I have to talk about the Middle East and hoax number. I'll call it hoax number 1000 by the left stream media. The never-ending manufactured hoaxes they come up with to try to harm Donald Trump and the administration. The latest is that the president had no clue that the Iranians might shut the Straits of Hormuz. That is so nonsensical. We on this show have been talking about it for 10 years. We've had many an episode where we speculated what would happen to the price of oil if they shut down the Straits of Hormuz. I can tell you, if this had happened 12 years ago, 10 years ago, before Donald Trump's first term, when we really turbocharged oil production in this country, the price of oil right now would be $200 a barrel or higher, and probably headed higher. Thanks to Donald Trump, it's a manageable issue, as Frank pointed out. I think it's laughable. You watch CNBC and they make it sound like we're headed for the Great Depression when oil prices are basically up where they were for 4 years under Joe Biden. So everything was fine then, but now under Trump, it's the Great Depression that we're on the verge of. It's just utter hoax from A to Z from the Trump derangement syndrome suffering left stream media.
All right. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much, Frank.
Great being with you. Look forward to our show next week.
Ben, thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to our listeners.
Join us again next week as we once again go inside the
news. You're listening to Wayman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.